Okay, on this video, we're going to talk about the 4 fastest ways to reduce cortisol so that you can lose weight. Yes, there is an absolute connection between cortisol and weight gain. And on this video, I'm going to talk about why those two go hand in hand. And I'm going to give you 4 ideas based off of science of what you can do. Some of these you're going to really like. Plus, I'm going to give you a bonus one, which is my personal favorite. So let's dive in. Okay, first, cortisol. Cortisol. Let's talk about this for a hot moment. Cortisol is the hormone that is meant to make you move. So let's go back to that primal lens that we keep looking at everything from. And if you look at when cortisol kicked in the hunter and gatherer days, it gave you this supercharge of energy so you could move and run away from a tiger. This is super important. That's survival. Cortisol was meant to help you survive so you didn't get eaten by a wild animal, but it did that by making you move. So if you don't use cortisol in the way that it was designed to be made or to be used, then it gets stored. And it gets stored as fat, specifically as belly fat. So really interesting study. That was a 1994 study. I know it's a little outdated, but it's the one we could find the most of. And it was an obesity journal. And it found that there was a correlation between high cortisol levels and weight gain, specifically around the belly in women. So when we are struggling to lose weight, the first thing I want you to think about is how much cortisol is running through your system every single day. Meaning that if you have a really high stressed life, then you're going to make more cortisol, which is ultimately going to turn into fat, especially if you don't move. So we'll talk about that in a moment. So what's interesting is that we also see that cortisol, when it comes in, it actually stimulates the release of another hormone, and that is leptin. Now, leptin is technically the fat-burning hormone, but it is also the hormone that makes you hungry. So when you have a chronic level of cortisol over time, now I'm not talking about acute cortisol surges. I'm not talking about like a stressful day or a stressful couple days. I'm talking about a stressful life, a stressful month, that when it's a consistent stress, this leptin pours into your system and tells you to eat. This is what we call stress eating. But when leptin comes in, it also inhibits another hormone called ghrelin. And ghrelin is the hormone that tells you that you're full and that you should stop eating. So when we have a chronically stressed life, what we're doing is we're saturating our body with cortisol. We're causing that extra cortisol to be stored as fat. We're increasing our hunger, and we're decreasing our brain's ability to perceive that we're full. Satiated is the word that we use. So it's not just one hormone that's making the problem, it's creating a cascade of hormones. The other one that I'm going to throw in there is insulin, because we've talked about this so much in my books and a lot here on YouTube, where insulin is, you become more insulin resistant when cortisol is surging through your body. So it's the most profound thing, honestly, that I have seen with putting out books on fasting out into the world is that the #1 reason that people get stuck with their fasting lifestyle, why they don't lose weight, is because they're living a very stressed life. And I can give you all the great wisdom on how to build a fasting lifestyle, but if we can't get cortisol under control, we're going to have a weight loss problem. So let me give you 4 ideas, and some of these are going to be controversial. That's awesome. The first one, and this is based off science before you get a bunch of haters coming at me, is have a glass of wine with dinner. Now, I want to talk about alcohol for a minute, because there is very much a new vogue to tell everybody to stop drinking alcohol. And I don't think anybody will sit here and tell you that alcohol is a health food. Alcohol is a toxin, but it is mostly a toxin in high doses. Based off research, that's mostly what we see, is that it's a toxin in high doses. But in low doses, in very small glass, like a glass of wine with a meal, where that alcohol is being absorbed with your meal, what we are finding, this is out of the Journal of Alcohol, a 2016 study, said that they gave stressed people either a regular beer or a non-alcoholic beer, and then they measured their blood cortisol. And this is what they found, is the non-alcoholic beer group saw no change to their cortisol level, whereas the alcohol group saw an immediate significant drop in cortisol. Okay, let's just unpack that for a moment before you all go running to buy a 6-pack of beer because it's going to help you de-stress. I want to point out that this was one alcohol. This is one beer that they gave, not a 6-pack. Too much alcohol or alcohol done over and over and over again, it's got a dosage. And if you tip into doing it too much, what's going to end up happening is it's going to do the opposite. Everything you're going to hear from me is dose matters on everything I'm teaching here. And so if we look at a glass of wine with dinner, with people we love, with good food, yes, we are seeing some reduction in cortisol. Or as this study showed, it was a beer. There was a reduction in cortisol, but it was only one beer. It wasn't 6 of them. So, and the cortisol stayed low for several hours. I think a really good way to approach a glass of wine at dinner is to have it 2 hours, 3 hours before you go to bed so it doesn't disrupt your sleep, and to only have one glass, and then to have a clean glass of wine where it isn't filled with a lot of toxins and pesticides and manipulated. You want to go biodynamic for sure. Okay, the second one that I want to bring to your attention is not so controversial, but definitely misunderstood, and that is to take a magnesium supplement. Now, there was a 2016 national report in the National Institute of Health, a publication that check this out, found that 48% of Americans are magnesium deficient. This is a massive challenge, and I think before I go into what type of magnesium you want, I want to talk about how you don't get a deficiency. Magnesium deficiencies are coming from 2 reasons. One, a high-stress life, which is why I'm talking about it in this video. The more stress you have, the more magnesium requirements you're going to have. And that stress could be emotional stress, that could be physical stress, that could be toxic stress. There's a lot of different versions of stress. But if you know you're on that constant or hamster wheel, or you're constantly running behind the 8 ball, you're like constantly having to run from thing to thing to thing, and you're not resting, what I want you to realize is you may be low in magnesium. And then it becomes a vicious cycle because you're low in magnesium. And there was actually a really interesting study. This was a 2020 study done out of nutrients that noted that a depleted magnesium caused a vicious stress cycle. It made for more cortisol. So magnesium goes down and then cortisol goes up. And then cortisol goes up, causing your magnesium levels to go down, and now we have a problem. So if you're living a high-stress life, we definitely want to add that magnesium in. I'll talk about that in a minute. So stress depletes magnesium. The second thing that depletes magnesium is getting food from conventional farms. So I've talked about this a lot, how I am such a fan of us getting these nutrients from food. But there's a challenge with us getting really good nutrients from food, and that is called what is the soil in which that food is grown in. If that soil is heavily cropped, heavily sprayed, in a more conventional style, it's probably depleted of magnesium. If that food is actually grown in a regenerative farm where there's good bacteria and there's rich soil and there's a diverse ecosystem growing within that farm, then you probably have more nutrients like magnesium in it. So where you're getting your food from really makes a difference. But when we go back to this number of 48% of Americans are magnesium deficient, I just want to point out that are 48% of Americans completely stressed out? That's probably an accurate statement. I don't have that exact number, but my hunch says 48% of Americans are definitely running a high stress life. And are 48% of Americans, are they eating from conventional farms, or are they eating a lot of fast food? Are they eating food from nutrient depleted soils? Probably. So that becomes the deadly combo. The high stress with with not bringing it in through diet, or not eating from getting food from a quality farm. Now we're going to see those two go down, right? And now the vicious cycle gets even worse.
Okay, have you been watching my videos and you're like, I don't know how to put this stuff all together? You might need my fasting lifestyle free course. I'll teach you exactly how to do it. Just click on the link above, it'll take it to you, and it's absolutely free. My gift to you.
So what can you do supplement wise? So I will tell you, for me, I like a good complete magnesium. I do a good dose of magnesium every night. The research that I found is that 400 milligrams a day, preferably before bed, will really help not only bring those cortisol levels down so you can sleep, but will also relax you and just kind of chill you out so you can go to sleep. Now, I personally do more than that. I do like 800 milligrams, just seems to work well for me. And the research says that the two types of magnesium you want to focus on is magnesium glycinate and magnesium citrate. Now, there's two brands I like. I'll put links in here. These are the ones I use. One is Qualia. Their magnesium has a complete magnesium profile in it. And let's see, just so you can see the dosage, it's 350 milligrams for 2 capsules. So you would take like 3 capsules of this before you go to bed at night. By the way, those of you who are constipated, magnesium will relax your gut so that you can have a morning bowel movement. Just a side note, if you take too much magnesium, you might notice that you have too loose of bowels, so you might have to play with that dosage. The other magnesium that I love is Biooptimizers, and I use them a lot. I didn't have an extra bottle here to show you, but I'll leave links. Both of them are great. I don't have a preference. I'm a huge I like to cycle my supplements, so 1 month I'll use Qualia, the next month I'll use Biooptimizers. But keep in mind, if you start getting really loose stools, you might back down on the magnesium. And it's really the magnesium glycinate that tends to cause more GI problems. So again, get to know your magnesium, see what works. Those are the two that work for me. Okay, third thing that you can do, and this one I just did a whole video on, and all the different ways it helps just to chill us out. But I wanted to bring it back to you in this video because, you know, cortisol at night can really affect sleep as well as really affect your weight loss habits. By the way, I just want to point this out. I hope you know that when you sleep is the most efficient time that your body has. It's the best time for your body to burn fat. Like literally, when we sleep, we burn fat. So if we go into that sleep state and we're super stressed out and we're skimping on sleep, or we're not getting good deep sleep or good REM sleep, you're not going to be burning fat at night. So sleep is really important for fat burning. Just want to point that out for anybody who's skipping on sleep. So the third one to help you sleep better is Kava tea. So drink Kava tea at night. You could do Kava tea and some magnesium. I've been playing, by the way, those of you who don't drink alcohol, I've been playing with some of those adaptogen drinks. I don't have any affiliation with any of them. I just play with the ones that have a lot of magnesium and a lot of potassium in it. So one of the beautiful things that's come from this moment where people are not drinking as much alcohol is that people are looking for other herbs and nutrients to calm them. So, and sometimes those drinks are really tasty, and I'll just pour them in like a wine glass and drink it instead of wine. But the fun thing about Kava, I mentioned this on another video, is that Kava will increase GABA. And GABA calms us. So remember, now let me kind of put a profile together here. For women over 35, you are losing progesterone. When you lose progesterone, you lose GABA. Progesterone needs magnesium. So progesterone after 35 starts to go down. You don't have as much GABA, you're more anxious, you're struggling to sleep, you're not burning fat at night, you're making too much cortisol, and now all of a sudden you're gaining weight for no particular reason as you go through the perimenopausal experience. So when I'm looking at these different pieces of advice I'm giving you, they could also click together. So we could bring our magnesium in to help support progesterone. We're going to help support progesterone production, which is going to bring GABA, and GABA is going to calm you. So magnesium can help that way. We also know magnesium can help by bringing down cortisol levels. Phenomenal. Now with Kava, and why I wanted to kind of backtrack through that, is that with Kava, Kava is also known to stimulate GABA. So have some magnesium with some Kava tea, and now all of a sudden you're putting yourself in this relaxed state. Now, study-wise, research-wise, there's a couple interesting ones to point out that you will probably be interested in. So a 2001 study in human psychopharmacology found that they gave Kava to people who had insomnia, and they saw that it dramatically improved their sleep quality, and it decreased cortisol levels and lowered self-reported stress. So remember, if you're stressed out and you go into sleep, all that cortisol, it's going to shut down fat burning, and it's going to make it so that you actually start gaining weight. So Kava tea can be amazing for just that whole bedtime routine. There was another 2020 study that was done in cancer prevention research that found a single week of Kava supplementation lowered both plasma and urinary cortisol, and it decreased stress in adults. And that was after a daily dose of Kava every single day for a week. So super quick results. Okay, the fourth one that I want to bring to your attention, and I'm really trying to highlight here some that you may not know about, is cutting out artificial sweeteners. So artificial sweeteners like aspartame, they're not only are they obesogens, and those of you who have read Eat Like a Girl, I put a whole list of obesogens in there, chemicals that make you fat. So if you don't have that book, you can go get that book. But what's interesting about aspartame is it's an obesogen. It's an endocrine disruptor, but it's in diet drinks. So we are drinking all these diet drinks thinking we're like gonna lose weight. But diet drinks don't make you lose weight. They actually reprogram your cells and make it so that you start gaining weight because they're an obesogen. But also, according to a 2012 study, aspartame increases cortisol production. So now we've got this whole cascade of hormonal changes that are happening from one diet drink that you're thinking is actually making you lose weight, but hormonally it's doing the opposite. There was also a 2023 review in a journal called Curious that said that consuming artificial sweeteners increases your blood cortisol levels and they cause oxidative stress. Okay, we've talked about, if you've watched my videos, and those of you that are watching them consecutively as they come out, thank you. I really appreciate it. And what I'll tell you is oxidative stress is where your cells are starting to break down. And they're breaking down and turning into zombie cells. Okay, what are zombie cells? Zombie cells are cells that are aging quickly. Or this oxidative stress is breaking down and your cells and turning them into cancer cells. So this is why we like a diet rich in antioxidants. But according to this study, this 2023 study, is that not only are you raising cortisol with these artificial sweeteners, but you're accelerating the oxidative stress, which means you're accelerating aging and you're accelerating cancer growth. So let's get off these artificial sweeteners. Let's vote with our dollars. So what are your alternatives? And I think the biggest thing that I always tell, my favorite is a monk fruit. That's a good one. We've talked about it. I did a whole video on sweeteners. I'm sure my team will put the link here for you. I personally love monk fruit. I think it's a great one. Erythritol, it's another really good one. It can have a little bit of a artificial sweet taste. So some people I found love it, some people don't. And then stevia. And stevia is quite controversial. So some people love it, some people don't. Some people it spikes their glucose, some people it doesn't. Some people it spikes insulin, sometimes it doesn't. So you have to be your own N of one on those three sweeteners. Now, the last thing that I really want to bring to your attention, and the one that I use the most for cortisol reduction, and I used this through the pandemic, and it's free, and it's called walking. It's called move your body. It's back where I started with, I started with this idea that cortisol was a hormone that was meant to make you move. Okay, let's think about this with hormones for general, because so many of you follow me because of wanting to understand sex hormones, but there's a whole bunch of other hormones. So remember, like estrogen's job, specifically estradiol's job, is to release an egg from the ovary. Progesterone's job is when it raises up to shed the uterine lining. Insulin's job is to escort glucose into the cell. Cortisol's job is to give you a burst of energy so you move. Anytime you don't use a hormone's job, when you don't put it into action and let it do what it was meant to do, hormones have an action associated with them. And every time we're not using that action, what ends up happening is it gets stored as fat. So estrogen's a really interesting one, because estrogen, remember, we get synthetic estrogens from our environment. So we get a lot of estrogen in beauty products. So if we get synthetic estrogen into our body and it's not meant for reproduction, it gets stored as fat. So cortisol operates the same way. So my bonus one to you is, whenever you are stressed, move your body. I don't care how you do it. Do some jumping jacks in the room, do some air squats, go for a walk. But the minute stress hits you, go move. And those of you who have chronic stress, move often. You don't have to move for long periods of time. During the pandemic, I will tell you that I was out the front door probably 5 times a day. My brain would start going, oh, because I had a small business, I had a clinic, and I was like, how am I going to keep my employees? How am I going to, I'd lost a good portion of my patients who couldn't come out of their homes or were scared to come out. And like you, there were a lot of people that were living in this very fearful place. Well, as a business owner, that was hard. And so I kept, instead of going to the bottle of wine, yes, I had a glass of wine here and there with dinner the way I recommended it. I did the magnesium, I did the Kava, I don't do artificial sweeteners, but what I did during the pandemic is move 5 times a day. Round the block I went, came back into my house and started working again. So moving your body is one of the best ways to use cortisol in the way that it was meant to be used. Now, in that, I just want to point out that when you're walking, you are doing what we call bilateral stimulation. That bilateral stimulation, right foot, left foot, tells the brain, I'm moving away from the stressor. So even if you're bringing the stress in your own brain along the path, even if you're doing that, when you're moving, that bilateral movement brings down cortisol. So it is a signal to your body to stop producing cortisol. You are moving away from the stressor. Another way I've taught you all to do it is to do the butterfly tap, where you're just right, left, right arm, left arm. Whenever you're stressed, it's so relaxing. I've done this on flights before when it's delayed, or I'm like, travel is never quite as easy as we want it to be. And I'll just do right and left tapping. I've done it on Zoom calls where things might be getting a little stressful. I'm not a fan of long video calls, but I'll do it with my foot, right foot, left foot. But that signals to the body and that you're moving away from the stressor and to bring cortisol production down. So I hope that gives you a little more context for why we have hormones. I think we don't really understand these wisdom molecules and how they control us. And I think we have a very negative impression of cortisol. It's like, cortisol. But if you understand cortisol's purpose and you work with it, you'll start to see that all of a sudden it comes down and it doesn't get stored as fat. So I'm giving you options. I'm linking the science. You get to decide. You be your own N1 and figure out what works for you. But as always, I want you to understand this miraculous body you live in. Your body is not working against you. It is working for you. And one of the biggest problems with health is nobody gave you the manual. Nobody taught you how to work with your body. And that's what I'm doing here on YouTube, is giving you that manual in as many different ways as possible. So let me know if this video was helpful. Share it with a friend who's struggling to lose weight. And as always, know that I'm cheering you on, and don't give up on yourself. You got this. You absolutely, health can be as simple as a walk. You're just maybe one walk away from living in the body that you love. I hope that helps.
On the next video, it's called Do This Before You Sleep to Avoid Belly Fat. And there's habits you want to do the night before, and there's habits you want to do in the morning, and all of those make a big difference. Make sure your room is cool. If our mattress is cool, if the room is cool, it activates the parasympathetic nervous system. This is a little bit like cold plunges.